Before sunrise, Kabul awoke to the sound of explosions. The city's sky glowed red as fires burned across several neighborhoods. On the streets, shattered glass and twisted metal littered the ground. People ran in panic, searching for loved ones in the smoky dawn. Ambulances screamed through the city's roads, weaving past crowds of shocked residents. Parents clutched their children, faces streaked with dust and tears. The smell of burning plastic and fuel filled the air, mixing with the cries for help. Hospitals quickly filled with injured men, women, and children. Many survivors described chaos and confusion. "We woke up to windows breaking and the sound of planes overhead," said one local shopkeeper. "We didn't know if we were safe or if the attacks would come again." The city, already tense from months of conflict, now braced itself for more violence. As the sun rose higher, soldiers blocked off damaged areas. Rescue workers searched for people trapped under rubble. Kabul's morning had changed in an instant, leaving a deep sense of fear and uncertainty across the city. Afghan officials responded quickly after a deadly airstrike hit a drug rehabilitation center on Kabul's outskirts. Hundreds were killed or injured. Many were unarmed civilians, including teenagers. Survivors described chaos as the roof collapsed and bombs exploded nearby. The Afghan government condemned the attack as a war crime and demanded an international investigation. The city mourned, blaming Pakistan for the tragedy as funerals began. Pakistan's government quickly released its own statement after the airstrike. Officials claimed their air force had targeted terrorist hideouts outside Kabul. They said the operation aimed to stop recent cross-border attacks carried out by militants who, they allege, are based in Afghanistan. According to Pakistan's military, intelligence had shown that several armed groups were planning attacks on Pakistani soil. "We took every precaution to avoid civilian areas," said a statement from the Pakistani Ministry of Defense. "Our only targets were militant camps and weapon storage sites." They denied hitting any civilian buildings or centers. Pakistan also expressed regret for any loss of civilian life, but insisted that responsibility lay with the Afghan authorities for harboring terrorists. The official statement called the airstrike a necessary act of self-defense. They also shared satellite images and reports to support their claims, although these haven't been independently verified. The Pakistani government urged Afghanistan to do more to control its border and stop attacks against Pakistan. They warned that if the attacks continued, more military responses could follow. The current crisis comes after months of rising tension between the two countries. In February, a fragile ceasefire agreement between Afghanistan and Pakistan broke down. Since then, violence along the border has surged. Both sides have accused each other of breaking the truce. Frequent border skirmishes have killed dozens of soldiers and civilians on both sides in recent weeks. Artillery shells, small arms fire, and even drone attacks have been reported. The sudden end of the ceasefire has put local communities in danger, forcing many families to flee their homes. The conflict has also disrupted trade and movement across the border. Villages near the frontier now live under the constant threat of attack. Schools have closed and markets are often deserted. "We hear gunfire almost every night," said a resident of a border town. "People are afraid to leave their homes." Leaders from both countries have made angry statements, blaming each other for the violence. So far, no new talks on reviving the ceasefire have been announced, and hopes for peace appear slim. According to Afghan officials, their air defenses tried to stop the Pakistani jets. Witnesses reported hearing bursts of anti-aircraft fire as the planes crossed into Kabul's airspace. However, the attack came quickly and honestly left little time for a coordinated response. Rescue teams and local volunteers rushed to the scene after the bombings. Ambulances, fire trucks, and even private cars helped transport the injured to hospitals. Many of the survivors suffered burns, fractures, and severe trauma from falling debris. Medical staff faced huge challenges. Hospitals in Kabul were already stretched thin, lacking enough beds and supplies. Doctors called for urgent help, saying they could not cope with the number of casualties. One surgeon at a city hospital said, "We need blood, medicine, and more doctors. Otherwise, more people will die." In the hours after the attack, Afghan authorities declared a state of emergency in affected districts. They asked the public to donate blood and called for international aid agencies to provide assistance. The scale of the destruction made rescue operations slow and dangerous. International organizations responded quickly to reports of the airstrike. The United Nations issued a statement urging both countries to avoid further violence. The UN's chief spokesperson said, "We call for restraint and respect for international law." The statement also called for an immediate investigation into civilian deaths. The World Food Program and other aid agencies sent emergency teams to Kabul. Their main goal was to deliver food, water, and medical supplies to those affected by the airstrike. A WFP official said, "Thousands have lost their homes or been forced to flee. We are doing everything we can to prevent a humanitarian disaster." The international community expressed concern about the rising civilian toll. Several countries, including the United States and members of the European Union, called for dialogue and a return to peace talks. They also criticized attacks on civilian targets, regardless of who was responsible. Meanwhile, journalists and observers found it difficult to confirm details of the attack. Access to the strike site was limited, and both sides accused each other of spreading misinformation. Humanitarian organizations stressed the need for independent investigations. As the crisis deepened, both governments exchanged harsh words. Pakistan accused the Afghan Taliban of allowing armed groups to attack Pakistani border posts. Officials in Islamabad said that militants operate freely from Afghan territory and blamed Kabul for not taking action against them. Afghanistan, in turn, rejected these claims. Afghan leaders insisted that Pakistan's airstrikes had killed innocent civilians. "This was an unprovoked attack," said a government spokesperson. They denied that any militant groups were being sheltered in the country. Both sides demanded international support for their version of events. They released videos, documents, and photos to prove their points. However, many outside observers noted that it was hard to separate facts from propaganda, as each government tried to shape public opinion. The ongoing war of words has made it difficult to start any peace talks. Each new accusation brings more anger and suspicion. Trust between the two neighbors is at its lowest level in years. The scale of the tragedy has drawn strong reactions from human rights organizations. Several international groups, including Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, issued urgent statements. They called for a full and independent investigation into the airstrike in Kabul. "And these reports are deeply troubling," said a spokesperson from Human Rights Watch. "If civilians were targeted, this could be a violation of international law." The groups urged both Pakistan and Afghanistan to allow investigators access to the site and to protect witnesses. Local Afghan organizations joined the call. They demanded justice for the victims and greater protection for civilians in future. Some groups accused both governments of failing to follow the rules of war, putting ordinary people in danger. Human rights experts warned that without accountability, violence could get worse. They also asked the international community to put pressure on both countries to respect human rights and agree to a ceasefire. For ordinary people in Kabul and across Afghanistan, the cost of conflict is painfully clear. The airstrike left hundreds dead or wounded, and many more lost their homes. Families packed their belongings and fled to safer areas, afraid that more attacks could follow. Schools and businesses closed as fear spread through the city. Children asked their parents when it would be safe to go outside again. Rumors of more airstrikes or revenge attacks by local armed groups added to the tension. Aid agencies warned that the number of displaced people was likely to rise. Many families now live in temporary shelters, lacking food and clean water. "We are tired and scared," said one mother, holding her sick child. "We just want peace." With the border still unstable and no end to the fighting in sight, ordinary Afghans bear the heaviest burden. The latest violence has made life even harder for a population already struggling with poverty and hunger. As Kabul mourns its dead, the future looks uncertain. Both Afghanistan and Pakistan have warned of more military action if attacks continue. Local armed groups have threatened revenge, raising fears of new violence in the coming days. International leaders continue to urge calm. The United Nations, the World Food Program, and human rights groups all call for an immediate ceasefire. They warn that without peace, more civilians will suffer. But on the ground, hope is hard to find. Mistrust between the two neighbors runs deep, and both sides remain on high alert. The people of Kabul and the rest of Afghanistan wait anxiously, hoping that leaders will choose dialogue over war. For now, the city remains tense and silent, haunted by the fear of what tomorrow might bring. Only time will tell if peace can return, or if the tragedy of the airstrike will lead to even more bloodshed and loss.